everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar entitled Federal Mandate for Continuous Compliance in the Database. Today, our CTO, Josh Shaul, will discuss some federal mandates that focus on data security, effective strategies for implementing enterprise database security at your location, and some steps that federal agencies can take to securely configure and maintain databases. With that, I'll go ahead and pass this off to Josh.
Thanks. And thanks, folks, for joining us today. So let's talk about continuous compliance in the database and some federal government mandates. But before we get into it, let's make sure everyone knows how to participate in our webinar. So on the right side of the screen, you're going to see a panel. If that panel is closed, just click that red arrow and that'll open or close the panel. Audio controls, you've probably selected those already if you're hearing me, but well, if you're just seeing it. There's a questions panel. You can use that to submit questions. Go ahead and submit questions anytime throughout the webinar when we get to the end. So we'll answer the questions that came in. And there's a raise your hand button there as well. The most common question that we get is, will this material be made available? And it sure will. You'll get an email within the next, say, 48 hours, and we'll get in touch with you and let you know how to get access to a recorded version of today's session. So let's get going. We'll start with an overview of some security problems that we face in the government world. Talk a little bit about some new funding policies that have come around that are designed to help the federal government address these security issues. We'll talk a bit about continuous monitoring, and then I'll give you an overview of how application security solutions, our DB Protect software, can be used to help you meet these federal mandates that are out there. So the 50,000-foot view, in today's environment, we've got attackers, and those attackers are a mix of state-sponsored, and gee, we hear about the Chinese-sponsored cyber threat every single day in the media. It's reached a real frenzy level lately. And then we've got, on the other hand, the hacktivists. And the hacktivists who are hacking for a cause have had tremendous impact on government, a little less in the United States than in other places, but if you think about the Arab Spring, the hacktivists really in a lot of ways enabled those mass uprisings to occur by facilitating communication that the government couldn't stop. The attackers that are out there are a mix of highly skilled, well-funded, and persistent attackers. Those tend to be the state-sponsored, really sophisticated ones. And, of course, opportunistic, lazy, but going after low-hanging fruit type attackers, and there's plenty of them that are out there. We see attack techniques ranging from very sophisticated and continually evolving. We saw some really interesting attacks on the Bit9 security company recently where Bit9's security software was used to attack their customers in a really sophisticated chain attack that, again, has been attributed to the Chinese government, and may very well be because it is from the Chinese government. But we've got some really interesting evolving threats out there. Government data breaches seem to strike all over, and the thing with government data breaches is that unless they impact personal information, there's no real rules that would require the government to disclose that information to us. So if there's a breach of the Department of Defense and some classified information is lost, it's very likely that there's no way with it we're ever going to hear about it in the press. But when our personal information is lost, like in South Carolina when they lost everybody's tax data, we hear about that in the press in a big way. So why is it that attackers have been so successful? I think a lot of the answer lies in the infrastructure that we support out there in the federal government. The IT infrastructure is just not equipped to defend against the advanced attacks that we've got out there. The attackers tend to be agile. They tend to be well-funded. They can move on. They can drop the old attack method and move on to a brand new one without any worries, whereas we've got a government to run and millions of people and businesses that are managed in a lot of ways by the government. So we can't simply dump our old systems and move to super new modern ones that aren't subject to the same threat. We've got a lot of legacy out there, and because of that, security is not ingrained into the culture of most agencies and most systems that they've deployed. Security is designed often as an afterthought into systems, and at the same time, while the federal government has asked us to move from a periodic certification and accreditation process to a more continuous monitoring scenario, it's been really hard for organizations to do that, and often it's because those organizations have competing priorities. They've got to continue to run their business, if you will, when with no real additional funding or resources, they're now being asked to make huge changes in their information security posture, and there aren't enough hands, there isn't enough money, there isn't enough time to go around and handle everything. So that last problem, that lack of resources, is something that's really got a lot of attention, enough attention that the legislature stepped in. So we've got some legislative mandates that are out there telling us that we need to have continuous monitoring. This once in every 2 or 3 year kind of certification and accreditation process doesn't work. We need real-time awareness of every agency's security posture, and we need to be able to address threats and proactively remediate vulnerabilities rather than wait for somebody to hack us because we've got a vulnerability and then go fix the problem. Agencies are required to implement software to support a program of continuous monitoring, and they're required to feed the results, the evidence of the success of their program into the CyberScope system. Here's a quote from Matt Coos. Matt runs federal network security at DHS. He says that agencies should automate what they can. The standards are mature and the tools are out there. Agencies at a minimum need to get their foundational pieces in place. Matt's really talking about putting the technology in place to automate the process of identifying vulnerabilities and misconfigurations and getting them fixed. Now, in September of 2011, there was M1133. This is the OMB mandate that tells us we need to have continuous monitoring programs. These programs need to measure the effectiveness of our deployed security controls. They need to monitor changes to information security systems and the environment in those information systems operate. And they need to address federal directives and legislation, policies, and standards and feed all the data and results into CyberScope. So this is really the sort of governing document that tells us we need to do continuous monitoring and we need to feed our data to CyberScope and DHS so that we can be measured and assessed. Eric Hopkins, the Senate Homeland Security and Government Affairs Subcommittee, says that the main thrust of the updated law is its focus on data, and that's kind of obvious, right? We're putting data security laws in place in order to protect our information and our data. But if you start thinking about what that means, where is this data? Well, it becomes clear that the data is in the database. We store more data in databases than we store in all other storage formats put together. So if we've got updated legislation that's telling us to protect our data, what it's really telling us to do is primarily focus on protecting our databases. So the database really requires a higher priority. The dirty little secret in information security for a long time has been databases are hard, databases are scary, there's some other team that manages those databases, so we'll just ignore them for now from a security perspective. And that attitude has been pretty pervasive, not just in the federal government, but in commercial industry as well, and it's left databases very, very vulnerable. And what that leads to is, well, it leads to data breaches. And so read the 2012 Data Breach Investigations Report from Verizon Business, and you'll see that 94% of all the data that was stolen is coming out of servers, it's coming out of databases, and 97% of all the breaches were avoidable through simple or intermediate controls, meaning we didn't secure our systems in the first place, and so somebody was able to easily steal the data. We left the front door open, and somebody walked out with the television set. Going back to the problem with funding, the federal government is taking steps. Just about a week or so ago, President Obama tasked Congress with passing legislation to give us a greater capacity to secure networks and deter attacks. And that included an executive order with $200 million worth of funding dedicated to the continuous monitoring initiative. So this is money that's on the table, or will be on the table very soon. It's going to expire at the end of the fiscal year in September. and is designed to be used to purchase continuous monitoring software. It's all kind of under a program run by the DHS called the CDM and CMAS program. CDM stands for Continuous Diagnostics and Mitigation Program. CMAS is Continuous Monitoring as a Service. So CDM is really focused on a few functional areas: hardware asset management and software asset management. So let's start by figuring out, what do we have deployed on our network? What hardware is out there? What software is out there? That's really important. You can't secure what you don't know about. So one of the big pushes of CDM is to get an accurate inventory. Then we've got configuration management and vulnerability management. Those systems we've got out there, are they configured appropriately? Are they set up for security? Are all the security features that they've got turned on and turned on appropriately? And then vulnerability management. Are they patched? Have we got good, strong passwords in place? Have we got the right security features enabled in order to prevent the environment from leaking information? And then there's sort of this other category of other tools where agencies can, at their discretion, purchase other tools that are related to continuous monitoring under the CDM program. So there's this bucket of money, $200 million, that's there to help agencies procure an entire suite of continuous monitoring tools. We talked about the different kind of tools that are there. And in addition to the tools to go out and find inventory and vulnerabilities and configurations, they're also looking for tools to help aggregate information up within each federal agency, to bubble this data up to DHS, again, with the ultimate goal of getting the information into CyberScope. CDM will have an integrator that will provide the tools, that will implement the software that's purchased, and that will train employees on how to use it. And the funding is going to be available this fiscal year, so the money will come available around May or June, and again will expire in September. Now this CDM is telling us to do continuous monitoring, or trying to help us do continuous monitoring by providing some cash to do it. When we look at continuous monitoring programs, there's really two approaches that we can take. There's the network-centric approach, where you focus your defense at the periphery of the network. So some examples are using web application firewalls, network scanners, configuration and patch management at the endpoint level. The thing with network-centric approaches is, in large agencies where there's tens of thousands of endpoints, a network-centric approach is just a massive undertaking. There are so many endpoints that need to be protected, just a huge amount of work. Then you've got the data-centric approach, which is where you focus on the data where it lives, for example, in the database. As opposed to trying to protect the whole network, you just try to protect the really valuable pieces on the network, or really focus the majority of your defenses on the valuable pieces of the network. With a data-centric approach to continuous monitoring, you're going to proactively identify and fix database vulnerabilities. Now, when you've got an agency with a large agency, you may have tens of thousands of endpoints, but even in that size of an agency, you're only going to have hundreds of database servers. So it's a fairly manageable task, even across the largest organizations, to take a data-centric approach to continuous monitoring. Now, there's pluses and minuses to each approach. With a network-centric strategy, you're limited because, well, you're trying to protect the network, and attackers tend to be able to get onto the network and bypass network-level defenses because they've got, for example, valid credentials that they've stolen and are able to use, or they're taking advantage of some highly sophisticated exploit. I mentioned the attack on Bit9. Bit9 is whitelisting software. They allow you to effectively only run the software that you say is legal and legitimate in your environment, and they do that with digital signatures. Well, the hackers were able to steal one of Bit9's certificates and sign malware. That the Bit9 endpoint security software was actually allowing the malware to run as if it were good, authorized, whitelisted software. Again, it was a sophisticated attack, but it shows the kind of limitations of this endpoint-driven strategy. Finally, you've got attacks originating inside the firewall, which tend to be the fastest-growing category. The reason for that is because, well, somebody puts malware on a laptop, that laptop gets carried inside the network, so now it's inside the firewall, and the attack is originated now from the laptop inside the network. That bypasses pretty much all the network periphery-based security that you put out there. So which approach is best? Well, honestly, you need both. You can't not protect your network, but you've got to really focus some of your resources in both areas. So federal agencies particularly are the targets of the most organized and sophisticated and well-funded attackers. You know, in the federal government, we get hit by the most advanced attack vectors that are out there. Both the federal government agencies and, in a growing way, our contractors, like our defense contractors that are doing work on behalf of the government. The right approach is a defense in-depth strategy, which means incorporating solutions and practices from both the network-centric and the data-centric approach. You want to make sure you've got the right firewalls and intrusion detection and prevention systems and anti-malware deployed, but you don't want to make yourself crazy getting that all the way up to the latest limit on every nook and cranny of the network. You want to do a good enough job on the periphery and then focus a significant amount of your effort inside your network, in the data center, where your databases and data live, and protect those, protect every nook and cranny of those systems before you go back and really look for every opportunity for someone to get on the network. Because the attackers are going to get on the network one way or the other. The real goal that you've got, you want to make it difficult for them, but more importantly, you want to ensure that once they get on the network, that it's as hard as possible for them to get your valuable data. Now, if you're thinking, hey, you know, maybe this database security stuff is something that I can just kind of wave my arms about and not really do anything with, well, because you've done that before when we talked about FSMA and when we talked about NIST 853, and we've, in a lot of ways, been able to get away with ignoring databases, like I mentioned earlier. Well, it's going to get a lot more difficult to continue to ignore databases. Database security is a very clearly defined requirement. If you take a look at the Caesars architecture document that DHS published to help organizations understand what it means to do continuous monitoring and to report on that information that they collect, you'll see on page 28 there's section 2233 that talks about database vulnerability assessment. And in fact, DHS was nice enough to call out by name application security products. So you can see we highlighted there DB Protect and App Detective. DHS is recommending that all organizations use products from application security to meet their continuous monitoring requirements around database security and vulnerability assessment. So what are those requirements for continuous monitoring of databases? So we've plucked them out from a lot of the guidance here. We need to be able to identify and report on the location of sensitive data. We need to be able to ensure that our security configuration is in compliance with DoD guidelines, in the DoD at least. We need to have vulnerability management to identify and remediate vulnerabilities. We need to ensure access is on a need-to-know basis. We need to make sure we've got separation of duties and least privilege. We need to restrict privileged account access to privileged users. We need to restrict the use of privileged account for privileged functions. We need to audit the activity in our systems, and we need to immediately report on any suspicious or unauthorized activity. Those requirements are things that can be met with database security software, with software that can find data in databases, that can eliminate vulnerabilities, identify privileges, monitor the use of databases, and respond to attacks. So let's talk about all that stuff. Hopefully you've got a good understanding for what your requirements are around databases. Let me explain how application security in our product suite can help you to meet those requirements. So DB Protect is our enterprise solution for database security and compliance. DB Protect is made up of 3 modules: vulnerability management, rights management, and activity monitoring. And the system is designed to protect any and all of your databases from the most advanced attacks, to ensure that your databases are configured securely, and to give you a complete look at who's had access to what data and when, who's made what changes and when, and give you the ability to ensure that all the access that users have is appropriate to their business function. Now, that section in the Caesars document that I mentioned earlier, that 2233, is specifically talking about DB Protect vulnerability management. So if you're looking for the very straightforward kind of most focused solution that'll check that box for continuous monitoring, it's vulnerability management that you're going to be looking for. But as you'll hear, there's a lot more to protecting your databases than just vulnerability management, and even meeting the requirements of a continuous monitoring, we're going to want to look at rights management and activity monitoring as well. But vulnerability management is often where folks get started, and in a lot of cases it's because it does allow you to check the box on CSERS 2233. Now, DB Protect is a system that's been deployed heavily in the federal government. We've been deployed at dozens of agencies. The software is designed to be very easy to deploy. It's agentless, so you don't need to install software on your database servers to get the scanning done. It's designed for a self-service operational model where the DBAs can see and scan their own databases, and the security team can just get reports and results. It's got a great role-based access system to ensure folks are only able to access the data that they need to know for their role. And it's designed to provide reporting at all levels, risk and threat reports for the security team, compliance reports for the compliance team, and remediation reports for the database guys to go fix the problems that we find. DB Protect is built to help you implement this 5-step process to secure your databases. Inventory your databases, eliminate your vulnerabilities, enforce least privileges, monitor for deviations, and respond to suspicious activity. Let's drill into each phase of this process, and let me explain how DB Protect helps. So inventory databases. We've got to intelligently locate all the databases on the network. We need to make sure we understand all our systems. And then once we've got an idea of all the databases that are out there, we need to maintain an accurate inventory of those database assets. So over time, as databases are added or removed from the network, we need to update and maintain the inventory we've got. So we've got a real-time, continuous view of our software asset portfolio. DB Protect will do that for you. DB Protect will periodically and automatically scan your network and identify any of the databases that are out there. And then it'll make it very easy for you to get a list of databases that are running across the enterprise, sort and filter that list. And it's all done with a simple system of jobs where you just describe your network, tell us a little bit about the IP ranges, for example, in your network, and we'll go out and find the databases for you and come back with nice reports that will give you a very clear understanding of what databases you've got, what versions they're running at, and where they are out there on the network. We'll also track the asset inventory over time, so we'll be able to show you on any given point in time how many new assets have been added this month, this week, what the number of assets in your inventory, how that's trended over time. You're going to see all that information in DB Protect. Now, once you've got a firm grasp on the inventory of databases in our environment, we can start to work on eliminating vulnerabilities. So to eliminate them, first we've got to identify them. So we've got to identify the vulnerabilities that are out there in the systems, and then we want to start fixing them, particularly the high-risk issues. We want to fix those first. Now, at Application Security Incorporated, we run what we call Team Shatter. Team Shatter is our security research team. They're the largest dedicated database security research team in the world. Team Shatter has reported more than 80% of the vulnerabilities that database vendors have fixed over the last several years. And we've really got the comprehensive knowledge of database attack vectors and vulnerabilities that nobody else has due to our security research expertise. Now, Team Shatter, what they do for our product is build the Shatter knowledge base. The Shatter knowledge base includes checks to identify vulnerable conditions on any database and rules to identify, really, attack signatures to identify any attempts to exploit those known vulnerabilities on any database. For each vulnerability, we write a detailed knowledge base article explaining exactly what the vulnerability is, what it means, what versions it impacts, and exactly how to fix it. And we cover thousands of vulnerabilities across a whole bunch of categories, including weak passwords, buffer overflows, misconfigurations, unpatched databases, even 0 days. When we see a database 0 day come out, a researcher or an attacker puts information online, we'll immediately put checks in our product so that our customers are alerted to any 0 day database exploit activity that's out there, and are given some steps that allow them to work around or mitigate the risk. DB Protect will scan your databases and identify these vulnerabilities and misconfigurations, and then give you great reports. So it'll give you a nice sparkline charts to track risk over time. Of course, every database is assigned a risk score based on the vulnerabilities that are found in it. So we'll be able to track that over time. And with those risk scores, we can compare database to database. Where's my riskiest database? We can compare business line to business line. Which business line is doing the best job managing risk in their databases? Or even database team to database team. Do we have bigger risk in our IBM DB2 databases, or is our risk larger in our SQL Server databases? We've got all that information at your fingertips when you start scanning your databases with DB Protect. And then because you've got federal requirements and you're often asked to present your results not in terms of what's my risk and what's the likelihood that I'm going to get hacked, but more specifically, what's my compliance to the DISA-STIG for databases or the CIS benchmark for SQL Server. What's my security posture with relative to NIST 853 controls, for example, or relative to FedRAMP controls. DB Protect has got built-in reports with mapping from all of our built-in checks and rules to the specific requirements of these benchmarks, of these security guidelines. So we've got a one-to-one mapping to the DISA-STIG. We've got a one-to-one mapping to the CIS benchmarks. We can tell you exactly which NIST 853 control category each one of our checks fits in. We've got a complete mapping to FedRAMP assessments. So if you've got to report your own compliance against these frameworks, our software can allow you to do that in the language of the framework, straight out of the software. Makes your job far more. Now the next step is to enforce least privileges. So that means understanding who has access to powerful functionality, who can see sensitive data, and starting to manage segregation of duties. DB Protect will scan your databases and analyze the access controls in your databases to identify and examine user rights. Who's a privileged user? Who's got access to sensitive data? Who's got privileges granted to them in not following best practices? DB Protect will analyze, understand that information for you, and then present very straightforward results on really where your issues are, who your privileged users are, where your privilege management practices are weak. It will then start taking the data that it's got and analyzing it against itself. So what I mean by that is we've got a list of privileged users because we've scanned the database with rights management to find them. We've got a list of weak passwords because we've scanned a database with vulnerability management to find them. Why don't we compare and correlate that data, understand one in the context of the other, so that we can show you things like what I've got on the screen, toxic combinations of users, very, very powerful users, users with high level of privilege, and weak passwords. So now I'm showing you the users who have weak passwords, but if those passwords get compromised, they're the biggest problem because these are really powerful users. They're not just guest accounts or low-privileged analysts. These are your privileged users with easy-to-guess passwords. Go fix these first. Our software has got the understanding to be able to pinpoint those kind of powerful vulnerabilities that you really want to take action on. Next, we want to monitor your systems and monitor really for deviations. We've got the sensitive databases identified. We've eliminated as many vulnerabilities as we can, and we've taken out as many rights as possible. The truth is we're not going to be able to fix every vulnerability or eliminate every user privilege that we don't want to have. So we're going to have to monitor the database. We're going to have to monitor the normal activity in the database, and we're going to have to look for the little bits and pieces of potentially abnormal activity in our databases so that we can log it and we can respond to it. Now with DB Protect, you can monitor your databases 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Know exactly who's had access to what data and when, and who's made what changes and when. You'll be able to see the activity of your DBAs. You'll be able to see the activity of your applications, and you'll be able to find out if anybody's trying to attack you by exploiting that vulnerability that the database vendors just patched, but you haven't applied to your environment yet. With DB Protect, you can monitor with precision, again, leveraging all that good data we gathered during the scanning phase about where our databases are, what our vulnerabilities and misconfigurations are, and who our users are. we can really monitor those databases now with precision for the specific types of events that can really impact us. And when something happens that's out of the ordinary, that's clearly wrong, that indicates abuse or misuse, you can get an alert in real time, fired off to your pager, to your email, or better yet, to your SOC, and put right up on the screen in your real-time security information management center, where you can see the alert and start to deal with it. And those alerts are going to tell you everything that's going on. You'll see the who, what, where, when, and why of what happened in your database. Somebody inappropriately accessed passwords from the user table, who did it, what system did they connect from, and how many passwords did they get. It's all going to be right there in DB Protect for you to do your forensic investigation and kick off your incident response process. Speaking of incident response, when we do see suspicious activity, you can actually use DB Protect to automatically respond to that suspicious activity, to take action without any human intervention to deal with issues immediately. So suspicious activity of the database, you really got to recognize that by having a security policy that tells you what appropriate use is, and combining that with a vulnerability knowledge base that tells you exactly what an exploit of a vulnerability looks like. And then you can take action. And that action may just be to alert the IT team or to open a trouble ticket or even put a blip up in the scope on the SIM, but it may be something much more interesting like initiate a malware scan or even take action to block suspicious activity, to lock users out of databases, and to stop data from leaving the building. So that incident response process, automating at least the initiation of the process is critical. But for systems that contain really sensitive data, it may be wise to actually take that a step further and actually automate the initial incident response and lockdown process. Now, of course, the end result of any security system, the way you show value, is not by saying, look, I didn't get hacked today. I didn't get hacked yesterday either without my security system in place. It's really not an effective measure. Although that is what our security system is going to provide to us in the end, we need evidence. We need to be able to provide metrics. And we need to be able to demonstrate continuous improvement in our security status to others. We need to be able to show that we're actually doing our continuous monitoring. And DB Protect includes what we call active analytics that give you all of the report artifacts that you need to demonstrate compliance with the regulations that you face. So we'll show you the risk in your systems. We'll show you the threat level. We'll give you an understanding for which systems are being scanned on a regular basis and which ones aren't. We'll show you which systems are in compliance, where your findings are, where they aren't, which findings are most prevalent across the environment, and where the most hackable assets are, where the most painful vulnerabilities are. That'll all be identified. It'll all be provided through reports. And you'll see reports at the very high level, nice pretty graphs and charts that you want to show your executives, and reports all the way down to the most detailed level that provide just the nitty-gritty information that the database team needs to fix the problems and the security analysts need to understand the risk and take action. Just recently, in the last week or so, we released a new built-in audit policy for our products. It's the FedRAMP policy, and this is designed for use by both cloud service providers and third-party assessors for FedRAMPs, the 3 PAOs, to use as the basis for examining database security during FedRAMP assessments. If you're not familiar with FedRAMP, FedRAMP stands for the Federal Risk and Authorization Management Program, and it's a U.S. government-wide program that's designed to provide a standardized approach to measuring security at cloud service providers. So with FedRAMP, the FedRAMP policy built into our products, you can now point and shoot scan databases for FedRAMP compliance without any work to configure the software and without performing any kind of post-analysis to map the results from our software to the documented set of FedRAMP security controls that are up on the GSA website. So we'll be able to provide you, again, straight out of the box, a complete FedRAMP assessment that's going to, for cloud service providers, give you an understanding of what your security posture is relative to your databases and get you ready for the audits that are going to come around. Of course, FedRAMP certification allows you to sell, really, to the federal government. It's a huge advantage for a certified CSP over anybody else. And our products will make that really easy. Don't know anything about database security in your security team? No problem. Our products know everything you need to know. If you can click scan and you can click the FedRAMP policy button, you can get a high-quality assessment. And then if you're a 3PAO and you want to send your security practitioners out in the field and be able to offer databases as part of your FedRAMP assessments, App Detective can do that. So our App Detective tool loaded onto your laptop and your team with very little training and almost no database knowledge can perform consistent, high-quality database assessments that measure every aspect of FedRAMP compliance around the database and give you a nice report that you can use with your clients to explain to them exactly what they need to do to get into compliance with the regulations. So that's about it for me. Let me summarize. Clearly, data security is a big problem in the federal sector, and the federal government, all the way up at the executive branch, is recognizing that. Continuous monitoring has been deemed the solution to really give us a better view into the risk and threat posture of our systems all the time. There's $200 million that's been made available in federal funds to help you to implement continuous monitoring, to buy tools, to do a better job. And AppSec Inc. would love to have some of that $200 million, so please come spend it with us. And our solutions really will do a lot to help you get compliant and make a huge impact on the security of the data that you store in your databases. So at this point, I will begin the Q&A period. So once again, on the right side of your screen, you've got a little panel. If that panel's closed, you can use the red arrow to open it up. There's a questions box there, and if you type your question into the box, I will do my best to answer it in the time that we've got left. So got a lot of questions coming in. I got a question from Bill earlier. Hopefully I answered it. Bill asked about, we mentioned federal mandate. He was asking about the guidance to the specific mandate. Bill, hopefully I answered you when I showed M1133, the OMB memo that mandates continuous compliance and reporting that, continuous monitoring, sorry, and reporting that continuous monitoring data up to DHS through CyberScope. So that's really the federal mandate that we're talking about. It's M1133. And then we've got the new money on the table through the DHS CDM, the Continuous Diagnostics and Mitigation Program, to make it easier for you to actually implement the requirements that are out there in M1133. So I've got a question coming in about the databases that we cover with our solutions. Our DB Protect and the App Protected software cover the major databases that are out there. So that means Oracle databases, Microsoft SQL Server, IBM DB2 distributed databases, IBM DB2 on the mainframe, Sybase databases, MySQL databases, as well as Lotus Notes and Domino. So pretty much if you're running it as a database, good chance that we're covering it for you. All right, so the questions are slowing down. I've got a few requests for the presentation coming in. Again, one more time, just let you know that we will be sending an email out to everyone who registered, letting you know exactly how to get your hands on a recorded version of this presentation. And then finally, let me leave you with my own contact info. If you want to reach out to me and ask any questions about database security or about the presentation today, feel free to contact me directly. My email address is josh@appsecinc.com. So if you send me a note, I'll get back to you as soon as I can and answer your questions. Thanks for attending today, folks, and we look forward to having you join us again on a webinar in the future.